Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. It's been a little while. With my co-host, my partner, Mr. Shawn Francis, I am Brian Altunian. And welcome to episode number 194, our fourth season of doing this podcast, where we started having conversations about what it was like being dads of children with some special needs issues. And it turned into a conversation where we kept encountering really great people who had really great services and things that they could do to support the community that we had never heard of. And so we started this podcast about 4 years ago, and we're excited. We normally have guests on, but we had a little break with the holidays. And for those of you who know, Shawn and I are both in the Los Angeles area, so dealing with fires and some recent activity. It's been a bit of a break since our last episode. No guest today. Shawn and I are going to have a conversation about a few things, including the impact of natural disasters and other things that could be impactful for your life. So stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. Awesome. Hello again. This is Brian Altunian along with Shawn Francis, another episode of Just Two Dads. And if you're catching us on podcast outlets everywhere, or on our website, justtodadspodcast.com, or on our YouTube channel. Thank you for including us in your listening day and your viewing day, and just overall being part of our family. We appreciate all of the input that we get. If you want to send us an email, send it to wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. We made it easy. wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. Any recommendations of people we should be talking to, or questions or comments, or anything that may have come up that is intriguing or interesting, or something you just want to comment on, send us an email. And if you're catching us on, we're doing this recording. We're not going live today. We're recording. And so we're releasing all of these. So you're going to catch that fact. Unfortunately, we can't respond to your comments since it's after the fact, but we appreciate everything, all of your input. I want to thank Billy Footwear for always being a great partner. They do adaptive footwear for people of all ages, all styles. By the way, they have a sale going on right now up to 60% off. And if you use the link that we have in our show notes, you'll get an additional 15% off, courtesy of Just Two Dads. So I'll thank Billy Footwear and everybody affiliated with us as we start a new year. It's 2025, and we are excited and really thought that we were going to launch into 2025 with, a whole bunch of great new stuff, which we are. But why did that show up? That's odd. But that was weird. Me. Yeah. Oh, that was you?
Yeah. Because I was looking to put the Billy.
It's 2025. So this is exactly what's happened in 2025, where we thought we were going to start something new, and then life hits us, and that is what it's like when you have a child with special needs issues. Life just comes at you as it comes. So excited to be starting this conversation today. And this year today, a lot to talk about. Shawn Francis, tell me, how are you doing? How was your holiday? How's your weekend? I want people to understand.
Well, the holiday and the new year, it's interesting. The holiday and the holidays were nice. We went right from that. Unless you're under a rock, you're probably aware that there's been some wildfires here in the Los Angeles area. And what's interesting is that it's still there's so many lessons that come with it. One of them being that I've noticed certain people that I know on social media that either used to live here, still live here, or have deep roots and connections here, don't necessarily have too many comments about the fires taking place, and it just kind of business as usual. There are people in other parts of the country that I see, and their posts on social media have little acknowledgement of it as well. And it just made me stop and think about what I always talk about in terms of raising our consciousness and trying to step in other people's shoes. And that was the one thing that the fire had me thinking about for the longest time. Because the first thing, for those that don't know, what we heard was that there was a windstorm. I've never even heard of the term windstorm before. But growing up, originally in the U.S. Virgin Islands, I know what a hurricane's like. I know what hurricane winds are like. And we were to experience that last week, which we did. And what came with it were other conditions that led to a quote unquote perfect storm for a fire. So that first night, we got to a point where, where we live, it's sort of a rural area near mountains and in the hills and stuff. And there was an evacuation warning. And we had bags packed and everything by the door. And we could, out the door, looking down our street down there, you could see the fire in the canyon, actually. So it was within sight. And the wind was actually, where my dad lives and where my grandmother lived, on St. Thomas, when the wind blows, it was almost like it would talk to you. It sounds like a voice, literally, like, ooh, ooh, kind of really scary. Never experienced that anywhere else.
Sound like a ghost.
Exactly. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's very ghostly and it's eerie. And when it can get, ooh, and then get, ooh, like raise and be very loud. And so that was taking place.
Yeah.
And you just couldn't really sleep because you don't know if at any minute, and we've been in a situation where we evacuated once before. And so you're sleeping very lightly because of that. And every little twitch kind of wakes you. And there's a certain amount of days to get through where they lift the evacuation. And then when you see the devastation that's taken place everywhere else, the gratitude is just so, so deep. And I adopted these words I kept saying to myself, which is, okay, I know you're listening, whether it's God, Jah, Yahweh, whoever, anything greater than me, to get me through this, lead me to wherever you have this portion of my life where I've been so blessed and so lucky, I will do my part. I will do my part, and that's what I've been trying to live each day since. I got an even newer appreciation for what it takes to change one's life and everything, because I'm resisting, I hate to say it, I'm resisting the urge to go back to life as business as usual, just because there isn't an immediate danger. You're still, that this life is limited, but there's still the temptation to kind of, I got my health, I got this, I got that, but I'm doing everything I can to not return to that, because it's just been really, really, really interesting. And everybody knows someone. You and I know multiple people that have lost literally everything. And what's interesting, what I got from Elijah is, there's a little bit of anxiety with the way autism affects him from a sensory standpoint around the house, and a little bit of panic, because what happens is you get these warnings and alerts on your phones too. And so when the immediate danger around us was kind of gone, he wanted an outing. And I was like, well, I don't know if we should be out and about doing things just to do things, but we could use a couple things. So we went to the store, and we went maybe like 2 cities over. We went over to, we went out and about, and right where we are, the air is clear, but we have a view of the entire San Fernando Valley where you can see smoke in pockets. So he saw some of that. But once we went to the store, and the sky was a little darker there, he used a word that I've never even heard him use before. He was like, "Oh no," he's like, "Call 911. It's smoky, smoky." And then he goes, "It's smoke infested," and that alone was something different for me to just even hear him use that. And then once we got in where I had to watch myself, I was on edge, because we go in there and the alerts are going off on the phone. And one of them is like, "You are in a pre-evacuation area." Then 20 minutes later, another alert comes out that says the first one was false, but it still has you on edge. And there's a whisper and murmur in the store. I don't know if they're going to close the store and stuff.
Yeah.
And from that, he's had anxiety asking, when is the smoke going to be gone? When is it all going to be gone? And I can only imagine what other families have gone through that have children, or young adults on the spectrum. And then there's a whole another story, people whose disability makes it a challenge for them to get out of their home.
Yeah.
It
was I would say it was definitely unprecedented. And for anybody who knows the Southern California area, first of all, Los Angeles is a desert. It's a desert that meets the ocean, right? So it's always very dry. We have these things called the Santa Ana winds. We also have this thing called devil winds, and they just, one comes from the north, one comes from the south, and they blow. And between being dry like a desert and heavy winds, the opportunity for fire happens a lot. We have fires here all the time. People say there's 5 seasons in Southern California, spring, summer, fall, winter, and fire season. And it's not untrue. You go back into history, and not that long ago, we had massive fires in Malibu, we have fires in Santa Barbara, fires down in San Diego, and it can be significant. And a lot of times what happens is people don't realize when there's heavy winds, you may know, if you live in kind of a suburban area, that there are always street crews out cutting trees that are near electrical wires. And the reason for that is, especially if you're in an area that's prone to a lot of wind, there's a lot of wind and branches hit the wires, it creates a bit of a shortage. And if it presses for a long time, it actually can lead to surges after they release the surge in the electrical panel, and transformers that are kind of like breakers in your house. So if you have something that's, that could be dangerous, the breaker turns off, right? So it prevents sparks in a fire. Transformers, to some degree, for the electrical system, are the same way. So if you've got winds pushing branches against electrical wires and it creates a surge and those transformers blow, well, there's sparks. Add near hurricane style winds to that, sparks fly, catch dry brush catches on fire, and the winds exacerbate that, and fire creates its own weather as well. And so for those of us who are watching the news basically 24 hours for about 5 or 6 days, you may have caught that there was almost like a fire tornado. They showed looked like a spiral, like a tornado of fire because of the winds. And so, we also have a lot of palm trees here in Southern California, especially in the LA area. And when palm trees catch on fire, they explode. I mean, they literally, fire goes up the thing when it hits where the leaves are. It makes for great kindling if you put it in your fireplace, but not great when it's over your house. So anyways, we did see that, we had that. And so, we had a huge area that was impacted, and you got those pre-evacuation warnings, and, there's evacuation warnings and then evacuation, orders. And, it's sort of like a ready, set, go. Hey, pre-warning, get ready. You may need to be evacuated. Get set is like, your bags are packed. We're going to give you a go signal at any time. That heightens anxiety for people along the way. And then when the evacuation order is, it's go. Don't wait. Don't stop. Go. And I realized I was watching this stuff. People are like, I'm not leaving my house, blah, blah. But part of the reason why they want you to leave is exactly the situation that happened in Pacific Palisades on the very first evacuation order. Everybody left at the same time, created a massive traffic jam with fast moving fire. And in fact, the police were walking down, traffic was stopped, hundreds of cars along a stretch. Police made people get out of their cars, leave the cars, and run down the street towards the beach, towards the ocean, to get out of harm's way. It was great, except that then emergency crews couldn't get through. They literally had to bring a bulldozer in and bulldoze cars out of the way so emergency crews can get in. So when they tell you to evacuate, it's not just to save yourself, it's also to get out of the way so emergency equipment can come, and work on the fire. Anyways.
Yeah.
All of that, massive amount of anxiety for people.
Yeah. And that's anxiety, generally speaking. For the neurotypical, can you imagine what that must be like for someone who is not, and that's what I got from it, is it heightened my desire to step into Elijah's shoes, where I'm like, okay, exactly what does this mean? What is this like? Why is he doing this? Why does he do that? And there's just so much to learn in continuing to ask those questions about each other.
Sure.
We can't ever tire on that.
even some basics. The air was so bad that people were back to wearing masks again. And so if you have a sensory issue and you have to put a mask on, otherwise you're breathing this toxic air, that was creating a lot of anxiety and issues for, our neurodiverse children and adults as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and the area was so widespread. I don't think people realize how much of Los Angeles was, still partially is, on fire. And we were talking about this as it relates to the island of Manhattan in New York. So imagine the
Mm-hmm.
island of Manhattan, I should say 3 islands of Manhattan. That's how many square miles of Los Angeles burned, the equivalent of 3 islands of Manhattan in New York City. So it's a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of burn area. And the secondary component that comes with all that is that once the vegetation burns and is destroyed, if you have rains, as we tend to do in Southern California on weird occasions,
Mudslides. Yeah.
mudslides and a second round of evacuation and
Issues.
danger and anxiety issues. Yeah, for sure.
And
It's
it's
crazy.
interesting because now I'm going to sound crazy, but when you hear all of that, you're like, glad you guys are there and not me. You know what? My appreciation for California deepened as a result of all of this, though. And for several reasons. When you bring a bunch of people together, human beings, like I always say, we're the most fascinating beings on the planet. Um, Animals should pay to come see us instead of us going to the zoo to see them. If a bird wants to get from point A to point B, it'll fly. A dog likes you, it'll wag its tail or lick you or whatever. Human beings, our behavior is just so, all over the place because this event has brought out some of the beauty in human behavior and people looking out for each other and compassion and kindness, but it's also brought out some of the ugliness too. Whether it's the divisiveness because of people pointing fingers at um, officials or whoever the case might be, valid or not, or people literally trying to take advantage of the situation by whether they're robbing somebody's um, looting somebody's home because they've evacuated or taking items that are being given free to those that are really in need, but um, I still love the place. It's not an everyday experience, especially these kind of fires. That's not something that's typical to this extent. But the fact that you can surf and ski and all in one day, is cool. But the people really are amazing. And when it comes to the services that are available here versus most other places for those with special needs or a disability, those things weigh a lot also. Um, and then for me, I just, there was an attraction to this place that I had um, as a child that I couldn't necessarily explain, and I just felt like I was meant to to live here eventually. And that's saying a lot for someone who comes from a place that people travel the world over as well to go vacation to as well. And as you know, I'm a proud Virgin Islander, and I carry that with me any and everywhere I go. And matter of fact, I think my appreciation for being here has a lot to do with what I brought here with me from that place. Um, but all in all, I just find myself
What does that
studying
mean?
a lot of
Such a wait, go back. What does that mean?
Mhm.
What'd you bring
in
from
terms of
islands? You
in,
brought from
in
the
terms
islands.
of in terms of culture. Like for instance, when I meet people here, and it doesn't happen as much now, but you people will be like, "You're not really from here, are you?" When you talk about a um, the positivity of a small town mentality, the idea of looking out for people, looking people in the eyes, you walk by them, greeting them, just a sense of connection and community. And the thing that people think would say is lacking in any big city. I don't know. I find myself, having benefiting from a fair amount of it, and I think there's a certain amount of it that's up as a result of disasters like this too. But then, even being a member of the special needs community and a caregiver, that comes out as well too, because after all, as I say, it takes a village.
Yeah. Well, I I grew up here in Southern California. I grew up in the Los Angeles area, and my experience is different than I think a lot of people who grow up somewhere else and come to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Because I grew up in a small city in the city of Los Angeles. People don't realize that Los Angeles is made up of multiple cities, some of whom are controlled by the Los Angeles city, leaders, and some are sort of annex cities that have their own form of local government, kind of like Pasadena and Altadena is actually the other big fire, as Altadena and Palisades. Palisades is part of LA City. Altadena, which is only about 6 or 7 miles away, is its own unincorporated area. So it's not really part of LA City, but it's part of LA County. But if you're driving on the freeway and you don't even know you're going from Glendale to Pasadena to Monrovia, it's out like Altadena, like you don't even know you're going through, because there's no break like there is in other parts of the country. It's like one solid piece of concrete. So, you don't even realize. But those cities, and I think that this is the key. It's not just that they're made up of small annexed cities. It's made up of communities. And I think that the one thing that I've been telling people who are not from Los Angeles and asking about, what's going on with the fires, like, it's not that like your neighbor lost their house, or, 2 houses caught on fire, or even a street caught on fire, or a neighborhood caught on fire. We're talking about these 2 communities are actual communities. So people who born and raised in the Altadena area, multiple generations of homeowners, business owners that are local. That's not just loss of a home. It's an entire community that's wiped out. In the Palisades area, they had their own central village where they had all their shopping and restaurants and banks and whatnot. And that community suffered such a massive loss. And I think that's the thing that people understand about Los Angeles. Los Angeles is made up of a bunch of these communities, and the communities have their own sort of culture and lifestyle and the feel for it.
That's what makes the place so unique. That's what when people would say, if anybody says, "Oh, I don't like LA, I hate LA," I'd be like, "Whereabouts?"
Yeah,
because this part's because it's so diverse. It's so diverse. Yeah.
To your point, you made a comment. You went a couple cities away, like in the city of Burbank. There's a period of time when the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson was filmed in Burbank, and they used to always open up with, in the beautiful town of Burbank, right? The beautiful downtown Burbank,
Burbank, right?
Downtown Burbank, which has its own part of Hollywood, the studios and whatnot. It's a completely different feel than the little community next door called Glendale, which is made up of a whole different sort of demographic of people, which is next to Pasadena. Like each of those, to your point, your area where you live, it's a community. It's a completely, there's a different feel for it. So you're right. When people are like, "Oh, I hate LA," or they ask, "Where are you from?" I generally say, Los Angeles area, because people don't really know that there's a difference, between these little communities. But to your point, it's a loss. It was a loss of a sense of community, and the sense of community is what makes LA so relatable and attainable. If you've ever been here and spent any time here, you understand what that means. So you're right. Sense of community has been phenomenal. The negative stuff that's come out and will continue to persist, I think, for a little while is life. But the beauty is how organizations and people and communities have come together and helped, their fellow neighbor. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think we're going to continue to see beautiful things from people, and things that come about. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to figure out, okay, where's the best place to even contribute, volunteer, and donate. And one of the greatest places, best places to start is the Red Cross. I think if you just go to the website, excuse me, for the Red Cross, and then there's right on that website, there's a banner for the Los Angeles region, and it talks about ways that people can donate and give their time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's, the YMCA's, even the, if you're a fan of the Lakers or the Dodgers, even those sites have places where, where people can go. And and contribute. The Lakers, like for the next 4 or 5 home games, are including donation boxes for people to donate canned goods and that type of thing. My local YMCA here, I live in downtown Los Angeles, so I'm in really the middle of the concrete jungle, and I've joked about it that like any big city downtown, any big downtown area, it's a mix of people. I thought, well, I'm actually at the moment in the safest part of Los Angeles because I'm away from these wildfires. But I think the downtown YMCA has collected a bunch of. There's so many donations. Some donation centers are turning donations away. It's been so overwhelming, temporary, because this is going to be a long rebuild cycle. And I think that's the other thing that people understand. It takes years to get a house built because of permitting and all the other things that are going on. And now with the fire exposure, I think we're going to see that there's going to be some restrictions around building or building materials used in these areas that are prone to fire. The amount of devastation is so significant that I think it's going to mandate, that some restrictions in building and again, the use of certain building materials are going to be a part of that, the rebuild, which is going to add some time. And I think that we're talking about a period of about 3 to 5 years
at least
to get back into where we are, sort of back to normal in Los Angeles. So the donations and the contributions are going to be something that are going to be needed for a long time.
Yeah. 2 things I'm thinking of. One is from just a building standpoint. I remember when I first moved out here in the 80s, the first time I saw any home under construction, especially coming from the Virgin Islands, and I saw that the frame was made out of just wood, I was like, that seems like the least smartest of the 3 little pigs. Why? I don't understand that. Because in the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, the houses, the frame, the skeleton, there's like rebar and stuff, but it's cement. Like, for instance, you get upset at a home in the States, you could punch your hand through a wall and you're okay.
As long as you don't hit a stud.
As long as you don't hit a stud, right? Virgin Islands, you do that, you're going to break it because it's all cement. Yeah. Now, I'm not a construction person, so I don't know if that has to do with central heating or how. I don't know, but I've always thought it was just so less durable. That was the first thing. The other thing is, I remember I heard someone saying that, man, I sure hope that we don't lose too much of this, all this kindness and all this looking out for each other. Unfortunately, just because it's part of the human experience and imperfection is part of the human experience, I think that there's a certain amount of business as usual that we'll go back to, but it's just made me want to, as much as I can, just to refuse to try and do that and encourage other people not to. That same bit of grace that you give someone, go ahead and continue to do that. We talk about things here on the show that, we have partners, as we do with Billy Footwear and things like that. And then this things that we share here that people are not formal partners of the show at all. And we just believe in sharing experience, and we believe in living the words of the great Muhammad Ali, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday in heaven, by the way. Which is, service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth, because the room is being rented. We don't own it. It is temporary. And so we believe in just talking about the good things and experiences that we have. And so when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, before I went off to boarding school, my mom, or I don't remember if it was my mom or my grandmother, I think they might have each given me a subscription at one point in time. Unity Church has a publication called The Daily Word. And you've heard me talk about being more spiritual than I am religious. On my bookshelves back here, I've got more than one Quran, more than one Bible, and there's even a Book of Mormon. They're all been given to me. But I remember that when I would read the Daily Word, it would have a word for the day and then a passage based on that word. And it's based in Christianity. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think a person has to be a Christian to receive it. And so what happened is, about 3 weeks ago, towards the end of the year, I had a notice that I had an issue that was being sent, like, on the way. Sure enough, it came, and I don't really know who gave me the subscription. I asked my mom, and she's like, I don't think I did. She wasn't sure. But I've been reading that each day, and the whole idea of just being reminded of something greater than yourself. Because I think you can be an atheist, see some of those words, and for instance, the idea of grace and what it means, the idea of faith, what it means, which is to completely let go. I think sometimes we forget that. The trust fall that people do when they
Yep.
let go and fall backwards. You trust someone to catch you. You're
Yep.
trusting in something greater than yourself. And as I prayed through the nearby fire and all that kind of stuff, I thought afterwards, I was like, wait a minute, what kind of nerve do I have? I hold on to a lot more than I realize. You don't completely really let go. You're letting go of it all and letting it, whether it's the universe, whatever greater being, deity, whatever you think there is, just let go and let it be, what it may. And I think that that's something to hold on to and carry us through as we, get ready to face whatever getting back to quote unquote normal is going to be. But hopefully normal won't mean going all the way back to business as usual. We can continue to look out for each other.
Yeah. I think, it feels like after a major disaster, the initial reaction or response is everybody coming together. But I think that only lasts, a short period of time. It'd be great, to your point, if it could last forever. But I think that, divisiveness occurs after the initial. And again, think about it. If you have a car accident, your initial thing is like, are you okay? Is everybody okay with the car fail, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, okay, so whose fault was that? Was it your fault? Is it my fault? How did that happen? Then you deal with insurance, replacement, all repairs, that's ongoing. And you get angry and you get upset. And there's a lot of stuff that occurs. And if you don't have answers, you're looking for answers and you're looking for, somebody to blame. I think that happens naturally everywhere. I think, again, we had this fire situation up in the San Francisco area not that long ago, a few years back. There was a lot of, who's to blame, who's at fault, who's going to pay up, who's going to, rebuild. That whole city of Paradise was wiped out in that fire. And so I think initially there's a ton of outpouring of love and support, and then reality does set in. So it's hard. It's hard to, try to maintain that level of civility. And, that's the first thing. I think it's difficult, and hopeful that we can make it not as bad here. And in Los Angeles, one of the benefits that I think we have is we have this sort of like live and let live kind of attitude about things. And so hopefully we have that, it happened. It's part of what's happened in the city, and we're just going to recover from it and go on our way and do our thing. But I think for families, and whether you have neurotypical or neurodiverse children, I think there's some of the same stuff. There's different levels of intensity. But when parents are freaked out and, saddened and dealing with all of this upset, and also have to parent children who are modeling response after behavior, I think it's an additional challenge. And this is something different, right? It's different than, than an earthquake or, something else. Just some people literally watch their homes burn on TV. They watched it live. Or if they didn't evacuate right away, they watched their neighbor's house across the street go from a tiny little spark to some smoke to be completely engulfed in flames. That is such an intense, again, it's like when we first watched the Vietnam War, the first war that was ever televised, like, that sense of unsettling reality is something that we deal with as parents. We have to remember that we have our children to also support. And it's, I think it adds to the layer of, and then add neurodiversity in the mix. And it's even more kind of an intense need. We need to remind each other, of the humanity and the civility and all of that, because it's a difficult task. It's hard.
That's why I think people don't really acknowledge, because to walk around and not be a jerk, it doesn't take much effort to not be a jerk, right? Because I don't think people are inherently jerks, right? So when I say that empathy at its truest form really takes work and effort, and it's kind of difficult, that can be met with some misunderstanding. What do you mean? Just walking around, you care about your fellow person? Yeah, but your default is still your shoes. How does that affect me? You know,
Yeah.
what's in it for me? You know, people think that when someone says what's in it for me, or they look out for themselves, that it has to be this Ebenezer Scrooge, the Mr. Potter character from It's a Wonderful Life, or some
Right.
curmudgeon. No, no, no. It takes effort to really stop and think about somebody else at the highest levels. That's why we can't ever tire of it, and that's why I was talking about like raising your consciousness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It really, and I'll say some people respond, with resilience. Some people respond with, you know, respond to bad news or a bad situation with the idea that they're going to be like, well, I'm just going to, all right, this happened to me. I'm going to pick myself up and dust myself off and get done what needs to get done. And I'll give you an example of that. And by the way, let me just say the flip side is that there's some people who are they're just numb and frozen, and their reaction is like, I just sit on the couch and not move. They're coming immobilized by this intense set of feelings. And so there's people along that continuum. One of my friends was a TV and film producer who owned this home in Altadena that was a historical landmark. It had been around from the 1880s, and he had restored it, or was working on the restoration of it. And apparently it was beautiful. I didn't get a chance. I was invited to a January and New Year's Day party at the house. And because I didn't want to fight, typical Los Angelino, I didn't want to fight traffic from the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl, which I'd have to cross to get to Altadena. I didn't go.
Right.
That house burned to the ground. Watched it on the news. That house burned to the ground. He's already bought a house. He's already bought a house in the area. Similar thing where he's going to get a chance to restore it. He's already in escrow on the house. By the way, paid cash. So he's obviously well-to-do. I have another friend who, his house in the Palisades, they spent 30 months building the home, and they restored it. They built it. They just moved in, and it burned to the ground. And he was on the news, and the newscaster said, so what are you going to do? Are you going to rebuild again? And he was like numb. He was like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I haven't even been able to process. I don't know what we're going to do. Well, we just spent 30 months building this house. I don't know what we're going to do. So people will respond differently to it as well. So you have to really know that, like, you got that. That's a continuum of response, reactions. By the way, the guy in Palisades has money. He could buy another house too. But by the way, those are two people who have money. The majority of the folks that live in Altadena are not the wealthy. A ton of people who live in the Palisades who have been there for
exactly
don't have a ton of money. There are celebrities who live in those areas, and there are people from Los Angeles, higher net worth folks that live in those areas. But it's a small percentage relative to the houses that were burned down, number of houses that were burned down. Some of these folks have no ability and no insurance. And by the way, there's a stipulation in insurance for those that had homeowners insurance that if it was a man-made cause, it limits the amount of insurance that they can recover if they give them anything at all. So imagine your house being burned down by, an arsonist who starts the fire miles away. Your house burns down. You've got no insurance, and you've got no ability to rebuild and build the house again. That's a huge number of folks in the Los Angeles area that were impacted by these fires. What do you do in that case? Like, that's, overwhelming to think about. It's totally overwhelming to think about.
It is. And then, like everything else, if you take a person in any given situation, I don't care what it is, any life challenge, and then just throw upon that the component of caregiver, disability, or special needs, it just changes everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Everything.
Sure. One of the first images we saw in Altadena was a senior center. It was when the Altadena fire started, which, by the way, started about 8 hours after the Palisades fire started. And they were rescuing people, older folks in wheelchairs and in medical beds and everything, and they had to get them out because the fire was fast approaching that hospital, that care center. They had SWAT SWAT vehicles, putting people in the back of a SWAT vehicle in addition to ambulances.
Right.
And that place burned down. But you can see where this complication, when you've got other issues, medications, special devices, things that, are so important to a person's daily living, in addition to their bed and their clothing and all the other stuff that's part of our daily living, you realize that it's an immense amount. We should make a new word, amounts. It's an amount.
Amounts.
Amount in Hebrew, there's a word called tsuris, which is like, you give me tsuris. It's like, it's like it's sort of an annoying amount of, you rankled by, nerves, if you will.
Right.
There's a tremendous amount of tsuris, headache, heartache, issues with this, when you've got to deal with those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I will say this. Let me say one thing. My son, who I love dearly, he drives me crazy, but he's a senior, and he last year he transferred to Palisades Charter High School. So he is a senior this year, and obviously a portion of Palisades High School was burned, but the majority of the buildings are still standing. The issue is getting kids back on campus when there's unsafe water, issues with electricity, just issues getting in and out of the area. They are scrambling to find a way to try to get back to a normal final semester for the students there. The elementary schools in that area were completely wiped out. They've had to move those children to different schools altogether. But at Palisades High School, where athletics are right in full swing, basketball and and other sports are happening right now, they've had to redo a whole bunch of schedules and whatnot. A lot of those kids that would go to school at Palisades, that live in the Palisades area, aren't there. They've had to be displaced somewhere else. And so how do you get those kids to the education? Like, there's a whole bunch of other things that, like, the day-to-day, stuff that goes on with your family that there's no solution for yet, and everybody's scrambling to try to figure it out. And I feel badly for this particular class, the senior class of 2025, because that was also the same class that in 2020 that didn't get a middle school graduation because of COVID. Yeah. And the stuff that those kids have dealt with over the last 5 years in that area, Altadena and Pasadena schools, were impacted as well. Not as severely as Palisades, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult. My son left his car broke down in Palisades area the weekend before the fire started, and he left his car there, and we didn't know if the car was there, or if it had been burned, or what happened to it. He was lucky; he was able to get up to see it over the weekend, and it is still there, but he can't drive it because it broke down, and they can't get a tow truck in because they're not letting anybody in. And so it's like little things like that. You're like, okay, that's so small relative to everybody else's issues, but to him, that's how he gets around as a 17-year-old. Has a job, he has friends, and
everything.
Like, just the basics of getting around. That group of students, that group of kids, those teenagers, really hugely impacted by this and COVID and everything else, and it's a whole new set of mental health challenges and other things that those kids can be, and the trauma and collective trauma that goes with it will have an impact for a long, long time.
I'm glad you just touched on that. I think for me, I think the word trauma or mental anguish or whatever have you, even therapy, I think all those things have been redefined for me over the past, I don't know, a decade, and maybe even a little less, as a caregiver, as a parent, as a husband, and with disasters like this that have taken place. Because the truth of the matter is, perfection is not part of the human experience. So therefore, every life has trauma, right? Not everybody has an experience with drugs or its addiction or murder or um, um, mental illness that, you know, challenges one's cognitive ability or whatever. Not everything is at the extreme end of the spectrum, but, you know, whether it's big gashes like that in quote unquote normality or just little slivers and cuts, everybody's got a cut of some kind. And I think
Yep.
we forget how, you know, the thing is, if it's not a big gash that's obvious, there's a cumulative effect of these little tiny slivers that take place. And then
Sure.
going back to why we can't ever get tired of really being curious about each other, and trying to stay as close to perfect as we first come into the world, just with that curiosity about each other, you know, is huge. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I agree, and I think it's one thing if you experience trauma as an individual
Mm-hmm.
or as even as a family, but
Mm-hmm.
in the case of this disaster, you experience trauma as a community. Um, you know, I think for me, as the week was going on, I was paralyzed to some degree. Um,
Yeah.
that's what I found that I felt like a little bit like a zombie walking around. Like I woke up and literally with my eyes half open, turned the news on to see if anything new had popped up, or went to bed, and the last thing I did was check the news before going to bed. And I know that can have impact on mental health too, but it was sort of like,
Exactly.
what can I do? How can I help? What do I, how can and then just checking in with people, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
What were you affected by, blah, blah. And I think that for me, it was kind of an overwhelm. It was really, it was
Very
overwhelming.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And I think
was.
that
It
would have
was.
lingering effects for people, because I feel a lot of people felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's worthwhile to just stop and sit back and take inventory of it all.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's different. It's yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I say it's definitely, it definitely gives you, I know, listen, near the end of every episode, we ask the question, what are things that you thought about strongly, but no longer, no longer believe to be true? I was doing that. I was thinking, like, if you put yourself in the situation of somebody who, literally in a moment's notice had to gather all their stuff and get out. So the people, as the fire progressed, some people had warnings and sort of like you had some timing. In the first instance, they didn't have timing. Some of those folks didn't. All those people rushed out there, didn't have any notice, and they grabbed whatever they could. And in fact, in reflection after, like, why did I take this with me and not that? Right? I didn't bring
Mm-hmm.
my birth certificate or my passport or any identification, but I brought my bowl.
Yeah.
So it made me think, like, of all the things that we accumulate in our home, and what would if I was in that situation, what would I take, and what would I leave? And of the stuff that I would leave, if I would leave it, do I need it? Like, why am I accumulating all this stuff, all the stuff on my shelves? Why am I accumulating all this stuff? For what
Mm-hmm.
purpose? Um, that was one of the things I thought about. Like, I don't need all of this. I don't need the stuff that I have. I'm happy to donate and give a bunch of stuff away because I don't need it, and I realize that what we feel we need, it changes when you're faced with a disaster. I'm sure as you guys prepped your bags for evacuation, you probably felt the same way.
Oh yeah. There's several things. So I'll answer the question that I asked each week because you just did as well. It's like two different parts, which is a belief that I once felt strongly but no longer believe to be true. Um, I've had it for a while because I remember when I had the revelation, I kind of made the comment to my brother, which is like, man, empathy. I mean, basic empathy doesn't take any effort, but to really be successfully empathetic, um, it that takes some serious doing. It takes work, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I used to think that it should, because it's a good thing, it shouldn't be work to be good, right? It shouldn't be take so much effort to be good, to be a good person, right? But to be a great person, to really consciously and continuously think of others while still valuing yourself, that takes work and that takes balance. That's the first thing. The other thing I got to thinking is, again, going back to normal, I said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what I got to do. And whenever I tell my family I'm going to do something, I have to really watch myself because they hold me to, oh, yeah, sure, that's going to happen. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And one of them, ironically, was that we have a fireplace that we've never used. And they were like, look, coming out of the holidays, we're going to make sure I get somebody to come out here and prep it and clean it. Because when we did a remodel over the last year, we refaced it and a whole bunch of other things. And they're always like, yeah, right. Like, that's going to get done. And like last week, I had said to one of the girls, I said, they said something like, yeah, like the fireplace is going to get done. I was like, are you really interested in having a fireplace now? Like right now, right this very minute? In addition to the fact that I don't know what kind of consistent cold we have. But anyway, my point was, they hold me to it. If I say I'm going to do something, I need to do it. And I love them for that. Sometimes it makes me not love me as much in the moment, but that's why I also try and keep promises to myself and other people. But one of the things I said is, we get through this and we're okay. We need to make sure that we have a plan in place. Not just here's an evacuation plan, but there's a guy, I share the article with you. I'd love to have him on the show. There's the Wall Street Journal did a story on this gentleman who creates something. Our good friend Jeff Levitan, who's been on the show, has a program called Living Your Life on Purpose. It begins with writing your eulogy. Eulogy consists of the way you wish to be remembered, so that you create it as opposed to just hoping it. And then you back engineer it to the present day, so that you going forward live the life that will warrant people speaking of you as you wish. And I always thought that was great. And it is. This gentleman created what is known as a pre-moratum, is what it's called.
Pre-moratorium.
Pre-moratorium.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, because I had it saved and pull it up. Yeah, pre-moratorium. And actually, no.
No, it's a pre-mortem.
Pre-mortem. Yes.
Yeah.
Pre-mortem.
Most people will create a post-mortem, which is
post-mortem.
When you do something and your post-mortem is a reflection after the fact of what occurred. Right. So it's a post-mortem. It's pre-mortem.
Right. And the article just says it's called a pre-mortem, and it's the most productive thing you'll do all year. And what he does is he revisits it every year, rather than just having like, oh, here's my New Year's resolution and my goals. Gets out of his own environment. Now, granted, he's a wealthy individual, self-made and everything, founded businesses that we're familiar with. But he has a book that he's written called, I think the title is What Really Matters. And if you stop and think about what really, really matters, not what matters in a moment or what appears to matter, that gives you some pause. So in other words, if you're thinking about the fire, you think about everything else. Okay, the fire's not here, but just what do I really need in my space, right? So then there's that whole minimalist lifestyle. There's a gentleman by the name of, I think his name is Tom Shadyac. Tom was a producer and produced a handful of, I think, at least maybe more than one Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah, John Shadyac.
Yeah. Raging success in Hollywood and really just like minimalized his life. Now, does everybody need to go live in a grass hut and where bush as opposed to cotton? No. But if you think about just the way we eat, what we consume, what we need to live, that doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy food. But the way we consume anything, the way we exist, is so much more than we need to really, truly be happy. And so there's something to be said for revisiting that on a constant basis as we hopefully grow.
I have so many shirts, sort of like t-shirt kinds of shirts in my drawers. I can't even shut my drawers anymore. I'm like, why do I have all of these t-shirts?
There's another thing. And I told Laura, I told my wife, I said, you know what? Because she goes, look, I did this for you, right? I just love her. She goes, look, she has a thing. Me and our second oldest, Vanessa, will say, I see your mom. For anybody else, is a word for your mom. that's a word in her vocabulary. Because she'll just
Yeah.
go, And if
Right.
you look into the video, you can see she'll tint her head almost
Yeah.
like the church lady. So she goes, look at this. And she's showing me the closet, right? So I've got a bunch of like, do you need this? Do you need that? I even took pictures. I was going to post it on social media. It's like, yes, once upon a time, this really mattered to me. Some clothes that I have that are from such an era, right?
Yeah.
But it got me to thinking of everything else. And the drawers like yours, like, wait a minute, I can't close it. What do I really need?
Yeah. It's the truth, and some of you are like, oh, my daughter gave me this one. And, oh, this is from that, that nonprofit that I had, run the race in. And, everything. There's some sentimental attachment to it, but some of it, I don't even know why I have it. Honestly, I don't even know why. I don't even know why it's there. I don't even know where I got it from. I have stuff hanging in my closet. Like half my closet is stuff that I use regularly. And then the other half is stuff that I don't think I've worn anything in the other half of my closet for years. I don't even know why I have it all.
Right.
I had a tuxedo. I don't even fit in a tuxedo anymore. Why do I keep the tuxedo around? I could have it altered, but really, when was the last time I wore a tuxedo? It's been a long time. Next time I need to wear a tuxedo, I'll rent it for the day.
Like I don't rent it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't wear it. What am I keeping it for? It's sort of.
And what it comes down to is like, and I'll admit, I am like, look, this blur that's in my background, that's not just for cool stuff. My stuff needs to be strategic because I'll be honest and tell you that I operate in a orderly mess. You know what I mean? I'm constantly trying to clean my stuff up around me because and this is a whole nother episode, but why do we hold on to things? And I find that, well, it's like, wait a minute, if you haven't missed that in the last 6 months or whatever, or thought about it in that period of time, do you really need it? And then by the same token, the exercise that Laura and I went through where she's like, okay, do you really, she's like, she's not the nagging wife. She's like, I'm not going to tell you to get rid of it or keep it. I'm just asking you. Right. Is this a donation or do you really want to keep it? And when I asked myself some of the questions, I was like, oh my gosh, that can really be donated. Which goes back to the other things we were talking about earlier. We usually have an organization that comes around. I think it's veteran. It's tied to the veterans. I think it's called Please Pick Up. And we will make an arrangement for them to come out and pick up stuff that we donate. And what we'll probably do this time around is take what we have, because we always have donation bags going, in addition to anything else that we come up with, and probably the Red Cross or whoever find some place to donate it to those in need as a result of the fires too.
For sure. Now's the time to benefit other folks and purge your oversaturation at the same time. So I'm in agreement. I mean, I think that this will be sort of the background of conversations, in the future for quite some time, just because we're living in it and living through it. And, when you look at the impermanence of life and the impermanence of things that you encounter, like the Ralph's and Palisades or the Starbucks or the, whatever it is, you realize that it's not as it's part of life is that beauty of the impermanence, right?
There's so much more that's fleeting than anything else. Matter of fact, like I've always said, once upon a time, this is another belief that I had. Once upon a time, I was certain that I wanted to live forever, right?
Yeah.
And now my thought with that is like, at the very least, if tomorrow was a promise, how valuable would today be?
For sure.
How valuable would it really be? It wouldn't be the same if you just knew that was going to take place. But I just had an idea here. No, go ahead.
The living between now and if tomorrow was the last day, or tonight, tomorrow was not promised, your living would take on a whole different meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're almost to the end, but go ahead and what we're going to say.
Yeah, I just thought of something. In our effort to, just like we have our ongoing series, we have another one coming up soon, things that men don't generally talk about, something that is too big for one show. It's probably worth us revisiting the idea of raising consciousness and come back once a month to kind of like I touch on the subject or have a conversation of what are we doing to avoid just going through the motions and just living life as though tomorrow really is promised. I'm not sure what we call that, what we do, but I think it's worth visiting because, like we say, anything that's important to the general population, and that is is 10 times more important to our community.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
On that note,
Yep.
thank you everybody for tuning in. And it's funny, every day it's sort of like empathy and love becomes more important every day. As you were saying earlier, empathy, be empathetic for the person that you're encountering. You have no idea what they're going through. They may have just lost their house or their loved one, or there's still 25 people missing. You never know. So have some empathy and look at the world through glasses, through the lenses of love. And now on that note, I'm going to thank everybody. We can do that at another time, but you want to wrap us out of here and then we'll close the show.
Yep. Yeah, to everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you so much. We love you. Just remember, again, questions are more powerful than statements. Let's get curious about each other, be a little more childlike and less childish. Live the best life we possibly can, because we owe it to ourselves to be good to each other. We love you.
Love you.